All right. Well, good morning, Steve.
Morning, Doc. How are you feeling, kind sir?
I'm feeling good. It's a good morning here at the farm. Midsummer, bright and hot here in Missouri. Um, but everything is green. Flowers are beautiful. The grass is green. The vegetables are growing. It's kind of a fun. It's a fun time of the summertime here. It's just beginning to warm up. But you're not in Missouri on the farm. Tell me how things where you are.
I live in San Diego, Doc, and as you know, and it's marvelous. It's as you know, I love the mornings and I love my life and I love the work we do and the things that you and I have created over the last 5 years of our alliance, cooperative effort, collaboration. But I wanted to start by saying I love the nook that I have been able to build for myself, Doc. Every creative, every single therapist, every person that does real work needs a nook, don't they? They need this place where I'm tingling. They're surrounded by the things that matter to them. And as I was looking in the camera, Doc, I said, my books are here that I've written, my image of the of Phobos, my degrees. This is Gandalf's sword, Glandring. The Lord of the Rings means so much to me. My family. This is where I thrive, Doc. And
Yeah.
as we start to think about session work and the seven principles that we're going to just absolutely hammer into people's lives, I want them to know as we start, you have your place, and maybe you, in a minute, talk about your place and the things you love about it. Every single person to find that moment of peace and then to become the person that they are designed to be, Doc. They have to have this place and that has to be theirs, that has their fingerprints on it. Do you believe that?
It's pretty inspiring to create a space. Now, we're not young whippersnappers, so it's uh, we've spent a lifetime developing spaces and redeveloping them, um, gathering things around us. I think some people can do that earlier than maybe I did, and maybe I just never saw it to value it. But boy, I value it now. Um, that I can look out my window and there's the deck, and I can look over the fields, the things we gather in our office space, and um, they are the things that I think reaffirm us and also kind of inspire us. It makes me think, the phenomena of scrapbooking. Do you remember that
Of
phenomena?
course I do.
We were I, I raised a lot of children, so we homeschooled them, and my wife and I, we were all into scrapbooking, and my kids still come back and pull them all out and open them up and go through them. And even though I made fun and jested a lot at the kind of the faddishness and the trendiness of the scrapbooking and all the little things you could add to it, it it did cause us to create these wonderful monuments of life that are so incredibly stabilizing. And uh, I think that has been neat. So, and I think that the current generation, it's amazing. Technology has allowed us to have a ton of pictures. Like people take thousands. My grandkids have more pictures in their first year than some of my children might have in their whole lifetime. However, they're not curated. They're not like pulled forth and put together and collected. And so I'm wondering how the childbearing age, young parents, how are they going to curate the thousands upon thousands of digital pictures they have? I don't know. That's a challenge that they have. But I do want to. There's another thing that comes to my mind. Sorry to just keep rambling, but at the ranch, that the boys therapeutic boarding school that both of you and I work at, we have started to collect printed pictures of events and give them to students. So the first box came in the mail today, early this morning. And so Wednesday, I'm so excited about laying them all out and letting these boys collect some pictures, and they start building fond memories. They can post them up in their bunk room. They can collect them. They could be of themselves and their experiences, of their peers, and so that this time of their life, which they often don't want to, they want to move past because it's a reparative time for them. And they're absent from their family and all that. However, there are some really good things that happen, and hopefully this will be ways for them to curate the good things and carry with them. So it's going to be fun to watch how they manage the pictures that we start giving out this week. So I'm excited.
I am too. And Doc, maybe, I always believe in serendipity. I do. Which is, by the way, the definition of that is you seek to do one thing, and the thing that happens that instead is really the thing that mattered. That's the kind of my definition of serendipity. But we started with this idea because I just started to notice my nook, my space, and maybe the first thing we do, Doc, as we think about emotional healing, and again, I'm tingling, which I've learned to mean that I'm on something of value. At least that's my belief.
Yeah.
Maybe the first thing that for the viewer, the listener today to carry with them and to put in their backpack, if you will, is the need for them to develop a nest, a place. And they say, well, I don't have, boy, and there have been lots of times, Doc, I didn't have anything. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I had the ability to write, and I had notebooks and, stacks and stacks of things. And I had at least a place where I could pick up a pen and a pencil. Maybe it's just sitting on a chair. Maybe the piece that we're to communicate as we begin today's venture is focus on settling. If your life is chaotic, things are out of whack, your money's dispensed, your family's dispersed, start by doing what Doc just said. You got a phone, you're taking pictures. Doc, it comes back to my mind of when God says to Moses, what's that in your hand? He said, I got a staff. Everybody's got something. So maybe today, as we start, well, let's talk about what you like in a second. As we start, maybe your task is to find a place to settle. What do you like about that message, Doc? What connects with you?
Well, the whole idea of the staff that struck me, when God said to Moses, what's in your hand? It was an anchoring symbol. So creating this space, and I think if we looked at it from like a mindfulness perspective, they would say that's part of the whole idea of grounding yourself into the present moment. And how can you be grounded? And you can't regulate emotion or be very creative if you're not grounded. So I kind of like the word anchoring a little bit better, in the sense that anchoring means we're able to view the past, conceive the future from a stable place. And when Moses held on, he could touch the staff. He didn't just have the memory of the bush, the burning bush, but he actually was tactile touching a staff. And so it probably goes into all these kinds of ways in which we can anchor ourselves, even in the midst of turmoil, even with very little resource, and maybe even little time. I mentioned the pictures. I watched one student. I walked by their their locker. It was open, and there were these 5 pictures of other students, very precisely placed. And in session, several weeks later, actually, I brought it up. I said, I'm curious about the pictures in your locker. And he was nervous, like, I said, no, I'm just curious. What does that mean to you? And some of the students that he had pictures of were meaningful, but some of them were just people that he had encountered. And he just talked about it's just it helps me remember that I'm here for a reason, and I get to decide if that reason is successful or a failure. Now, this young man has been making a lot of progress, okay, but I see those 5 pictures being grounding for him, anchoring him into his experience and helping him from an anchored position look ahead to what he's going to do with the experience. And not every student is at that point. It takes a while for them to get there. And so I think that is a powerful piece of curating. I'm going to go back to that word, curating some images or some symbols, some items that create that nesting space. I have some. I'm thinking about all kinds of situations where they do this in their bunk. I know of like female girls that will build a bulletin board with pictures of their peers, and there's lots of ways. There's lots of ways to do that, and maybe we should brainstorm a little bit of that, of all the ways you could do it simply, and with very little resource.
Well, let's just talk about, Doc, the concept of chaos, okay, as we start.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because much of the work that you and I do is it begins at least with triage, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're coming in chaotic.
Yeah, well, we're pulling
coming in fast
out.
And hard, like a plane in crash landing mode.
And most of the work that I've done in my life has always started with triage, with families and people and churches and institutions and organizations. And so the first thing I guess I would suggest to them, and again, this is all kind of anchored, we're going to use your word, anchored, in this idea of nesting, is that you can start today. And where you are with what you have, and even if it is the most limited and seemingly diminished resource, you can start today by just carving a space. Maybe it's at a park bench. Doc, how many times in my life when I was a preacher, I'm tingling again, when I was a young preacher, I didn't have a church, Doc. There was a stump in a park. I am not making this up.
Wow.
And I would go there and I would preach these sermons to squirrels and, turkeys, and there were peacocks that would scream. But it was me out in the middle. So my point is, you need to find a place to withdraw. There's the piece, isn't it, Doc? Withdraw. Find that place of solitude. Take up a pencil and a paper. You can afford that. Or go get one somewhere and start to sketch out where your life is. And here's what the piece I would say, Doc. I love your word anchor. The anchor point is when you put that pen or pencil to the paper, or start to make notes on your phone, or tick-tap on your pad and say, my life is fill in the blank, and be straight with yourself. You want to get better?
Tactile. It's that tactile, or that embodied. I think the embodied sense. We've got to pull away from a virtual world.
Yeah.
I think we're going to discover that there are a lot of benefits to digital life, but the disembodied element of the virtual world is actually detrimental to it may even be detrimental to our neurobiology, but it's definitely detrimental to our psychology. of not having an embodied life because we are embodied people. And then we don't know what to do with our body. And that just perpetuates chaos. So the tactile nature, I think, is so important. And I think I would always drive my recommendation in that direction of what will you do tactile. So a man I admire greatly is my father-in-law. He is one of the self-made Americans of the builder generation. He's long been with the Lord, but I have a series of silver dollars from his. And so he started off one year, he would start every year with a silver dollar in his pocket, a new silver dollar. And it really was an anchor for him. And that you could tell he was anxious in building his business and his family, and an incredibly generous man. And he would rub that silver dollar. So all the silver dollars I have are almost rubbed smooth. And I gave one to my son, who was starting off to be an entrepreneur like his grandfather. And he has that and holds it, you know. When he has to make big decisions, he references like going to get it. And I think that tactile thing, that coin, you know, is an anchor that creates that curative place for you then to be creative and to take a breath and all the things that you need to do. So honestly, I'm thinking all kinds of examples of how this plays out. This idea of creating space.
Let's press into this idea. The first big idea we have is session work, right? That's our big first idea. And so it just came to me that this is a session, Doc. There are people that this is going to be a session for, where this message, this communication is going to ring true and find anchor in their life. So let's try to drill down and give some takeaways. You know me well enough to know that I like takeaways. I like can we do? How can we give some takeaways here to some people?
We probably need to define. You use that word, session.
I love that word.
You do love that word, and you have a lot of meaning.
I do
to it. And so I remember first hearing about it, hear you use it. And I think my first thought, and most people's first thought, is those are like time with other people.
Okay.
They're therapy sessions. Then I began to see you really mean that no, it's not just time with another person, and maybe time with yourself, time with the Lord. It's a pause that you put into your world, that you allow ideas and thoughts and feelings to simmer and to emerge. It's a self kind of processing time, even when you're with yourself. You have a huge definition of it. This is what I've grown to understand about you. When you say session work, you're talking about an intentional time with somebody, by yourself, somewhere. It's just intentional time where you actually grow. So, but it is so embedded in your like vocabulary, it just comes out. I don't want people to miss that when you talk about session. So yes, I think when they touch that, the symbols of their life, it does become a session. In a sense, it's a time for them to expand.
Let's draw some things together here, Doc. I love our conversation always. You know that. And one of the things that drew both of us to this is our conversations. Other people have said to us that have listened to us, wow, why don't you talk about that or record that? That's how this happened. Let's talk about an articulating. And so that means we're getting close to some truth here, Doc. First off, we began by saying you need a place. So we want you to think about a place. Then we talked about Moses with his staff, and you start with what you have. Then you mentioned this tactile thing with your family and with these with these photo books and how that brings your
Yeah.
children, your family. Then you mentioned these silver coins that were rubbed that have now become these kind of heirlooms of your family, if you will. And then I came to the place where I said, start to write, start to separate yourself. And for me, Doc, what session work is first off, it's very intentional. Next, it is absolutely scheduled. It is absolutely things that you will not
Mm.
relinquish. As you know, I am fearless and fierce in my protection of the moments that I have. The next thing is it is all about whatever the topic is. It's very focused. And then the final thing is that it has these future me elements, which we'll get to in future days. But and the big circle for me, Doc, kind of the ribbon that ties that is always around projects. Projects are how lives are built. And so for today, what we want those of you that are listening and paying attention to start to get your mind around is chaos can be interrupted. Okay? Chaos can be interrupted. Chaos is not interminable. Doc, you and I have seen some very, very difficult, seemingly impossible strains of really crazy stuff that have been able to be stopped. The
Right.
next thing is chaos can be reformed, and energy can be reshaped, and lives can be refashioned. That's what we want to communicate, at least what I wish to communicate when it comes to session work, Doc.
Interrupting chaos. Wow. That is, I think that's very overwhelming for people. Um, and they often don't think they can interrupt it.
Oh,
Um, I think psychologically we would say that that there is a mechanism um, of avoidance that actually moves to just kind of shutting off the chaos rather than actually navigating through it. Um, and it's that fight, flight, freeze, the freeze part or the flight part. Um, and so you're running from chaos rather than confronting chaos. And I guess if something is life threatening, please do whichever of those seems appropriate to you. But uh, life is not always life threatening, and I think dysfunction comes when we stay thinking as if life is always life threatening, that everything is life threatening. Going to work is life threatening. Going outside is life threatening. Socializing is life threatening, and it's really not. And that's where post-traumatic stress disorder emerges. That's where depression happens. Our fascination with trying to understand the role of trauma. I think avoidance is a key to that. So it's very hard for people, but I think that you just take it a little step. So I'm just reminded that Moses grabbed the staff. My father-in-law touched the coin. You picked up the pen. It doesn't take a monumental thing to interrupt chaos. In fact, it might be what you need is a small thing to interrupt chaos. I'm wondering, and I'm thinking out loud right now, is if some people really take the approach that they have to match the chaos to interrupt it, and you do not. You don't have to match the strength of the chaos.
will you say that again, Doc? Say that again.
I don't think you have to match the power, the magnitude of the chaos in order to interrupt it. Sometimes you just have to do one little thing in order to interrupt it. The pen, the coin, the picture, the pause, the staff. What is the staff that God gave Moses the staff. What is the staff that God is giving you or me or anybody? What are those things? And being able to just touch them, such a little thing, tactilely, actually touching them, and then drawing our attention to them and being grateful for them, all things that are meaningful. There's tons of research about the power of gratitude. And so I think the small little touch could even be activating gratitude, which then just starts to fill up space and counteract chaos.
Can we go right back up the ladder?
Mm-hmm.
This is so powerful, Doc. We started with hello, got the Nook, moved from there to things that make us feel comfortable, talked a lot about how you actually start to interrupt chaos, gave 4 or 5 tangible ways that real people, myself being one of them, have used and use your father-in-law and Moses and the students at the ranch and your family. And now we're at this place where we're showing people that, I'm going to try to quote you, you don't have to match the intensity of the chaos.
Yeah.
And so as we start to think about what we're trying to do, Doc, our intentions are just to follow the leadership of the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Our intention is to do everything we can to, to take, let me say it in my way, and then you always pretty things up. You really do. But for me to take all of the acumen, that's a big word, folks, that means all the collection of intelligence, experience, events, failures, successes, quasi-successes, collapses that we have gathered together and to put them into ways that we can deliver them so that there might become this premise. I have this belief, Doc, I have this thing I say in session with students
Mm-hmm.
and families and clients, perhaps today. So everything in our life, at least in my life, is perhaps today is the day when that inkling, that rubbing of that coin of healing starts to, infiltrate that person's life that feels overwhelmed. What do you think about that?
I think that's exactly the healing path. I, I'm thinking of a client that I worked with, and came from a very abusive background, was adopted into a home, struggled greatly, worked with him for several months, and we would start talk. He would never talk about the things that really bothered him. Instead, he would like kind of begin to shut down that avoidance I was talking about before. And he would do things like he would make fists, and he would start moving his knuckles and fingers, and you could tell. And finally, he acknowledged to me that what he was doing during that time is retreating into a dark space where there was nothing. That's avoidance. And I challenged him that was necessary at the time, but was it still necessary to do that? So the next 4 months was just inviting him out of that dark space when he would be angry. But what I noticed is that he carried around these notebooks. Every time he would come to a therapy session, he had these notebooks. And so I finally asked if I could see something. What did he do with the notebooks? And he kind of kept things that were important to him in these notebooks. And he wrote occasionally, but not very much. In fact, most of the pages were blank. Like all but like 3. And so as we continued working and helping him actually begin to feel comfortable enough to begin to just talk about the pain that he was experiencing, that and alone, just being able to talk about it. I had a moment toward the end of treatment with him where he actually shows up unscheduled and asked to see me. And he is upset about some stuff that has happened, something that's been troubling him. And he comes, I had a time. So he comes in, he starts to, he won't even sit. He's got a piece of paper that obviously was a letter he received or something like that. And he's crumbling it up, but you could see him fight to not go to that room. And, so he starts to tell me, and I just, ask questions. And here's where psychotherapy isn't magic. It's just human interaction. And I let him begin to talk about it. And he did. He walked through all of it. And within like 40 minutes, he had kind of laid out everything, had no resolution. He didn't like have a solution to it. He just was able to be present with it, which I think was the key. Then he sits down and has this switch and he says, can I read you something? And I was like, are you writing? And he said, yes. And he had written a poem. And he said, I'll read it to you, but you have to promise not to ask me any questions about it. Obviously, I'm pretty inquisitive. So he didn't want me to draw any conclusions about his life or what he was going through. And I said, sure, I would love to hear it. And I won't ask any questions. Am I allowed to comment though? So he did allow me one comment. It was quite funny. He said, you can make one comment, but that's all. And so he read me this beautiful piece, this beautiful lament. And it was absolutely riveting. It was just a lament, well written, well formed, very expressive. This client had gone from chaos, found stability, and I think he found the pen. And because he was constantly being moved around, he didn't have a lot of physical space to maneuver. Found the pen, found it in that journal, and that was an anchoring place for him. And from that anchoring place, he could leave that dark room where everything had to be silent and dark, the nothingness, to survive, and discover that he could survive much, much better in daily life by being able to express. And the pen and that journal became that anchoring place.
There's a lot that we're talking about today, folks. A lot. It starts by you finding a place. Doc just told you a story about a kid that's been bounced like a ping pong ball on a tile floor, but he found Doc, and the Lord connected the two of them. And this kid was able to start writing and is able to come out of the chaos and the darkness. And what I think is important, Doc, and valuable now to really, really drill into is, in the end, pain and suffering have to take on the form of creativity in order to be expressed. Doc, you and I have been doing this a long time. Every single client that I have ever seen, can't speak for you. I've been doing this forever, Doc, in some form, fashion, or style, or flavor.
Right.
Every single client has to do something tactile. To interrupt the chaos, they have to weld, they have to carve, they have to fish, they have to write, they have to build a poem, they have to do something. The energy has to be rediverted, Doc. And I want you to speak into that a little bit.
That are listening to us, any art therapists that are listening to us are probably shouting and leaping for joy.
It's
Dance
true.
therapists, these are those kind of expressive therapies. They've been yelling this for a long time, but I think you're right. They have to do something. And that goes to my theory of change. Change is an experience. There's no real change that doesn't happen without you encountering something, even something simple like a walk through the park. So, yeah, it's right on. I think that's right on point. It's been good. It's been a good.
So what have we learned today,
conversation.
Doc? Let's try to you know me. I like tie downs. I like takeaways. I like deliverables.
You,
The guy that taught me how to communicate. I've told you this story, but I won't tell it here. Of how I learned it. He would talk about throwing darts at people's minds.
mhm.
What's the takeaway? What's the tie down? What's the dart that we want to throw today as we kind of tidy up our piece?
Well, I think I want to just allow to surface the value of the small thing in the midst of chaos, the big chaos, um, and do not discredit that very small intervention.
Can
You
you
don't
say that,
always
Doc?
know,
Doc, say
but
that again. Say that.
do not discredit the very small intervention, either one that you are called into, you're challenged with, or you just choose on your own. Um, the power of the small intervention to turn the big ship. Uh, I want that to be on the top of my mind as I go on the rest of this day and the rest of this week.
And for me, Doc, my takeaway is start. And with the intent of building your nest. You're right. We didn't start here, did we, Doc?
No,
We didn't start in this nest, in this nook. At least I didn't. I can't speak for you.
no. Mm-mm.
Start.
Yep,
Bless you, Doc.
that's good. Well, it was good chatting.
Yeah.
I think we are. This is only episode 2. Uh, we are on our way here to really kind of pointing out the firmament of care that we call Canopy, and what are some of those pieces that are part of that. And I hope our conversations continue in future episodes to kind of uh, accent that, and that it can be meaningful to other people to listen in to our conversations.
Bless you, Doc. Appreciate you, and I love the moments that we get to spend together. Be
All
well.
right. Be well too. Bye bye.